Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup. No special announcements or anything, so let's jump right in. First up, the WonderSwan Flashmaster is now back in stock and ready to ship. The price is $123 or $130 if you would like a dust cover for it as well. However, both come with the cartridge cover itself, so it'll look like a 3D printed WonderSwan cartridge. And the cart itself is black and red like pictured, but the dust cover could be black on red, or black on gray. It's just chosen at random. The games are loaded via software, and there are Windows, Mac, and Linux versions available. And there's a little bit that you're going to want to know about this one if you're unfamiliar with the product. This isn't quite a single flash cart, and it's not quite a standard ROM cart either. You can't just dump a bunch of ROMs onto a micro SD card and throw it in. You have to program this with software, and there are 16 slots available, but everything on there requires its own slot. So the menu system would have to be one. And then every time you load up a game, if it has a save game file, that would also require a slot. So if you load this up with a menu and 15 games and one of them turns out to need to save, it'll just overwrite whatever ROM is next to it. So it's going to take a little bit of planning, and there's, I think, over 100 games for the WonderSwan. So it's not as easy as like an EverDrive where you just dump everything onto it. But I still think it's very handy and a great way for people to experience different types of games, or maybe just have your favorites all in one spot rather than carry around multiple cartridges. So I'm a fan of all of these types of things, and I think I think they're all great products. I just think that you should know this stuff before buying, which is why I wanted to walk you all through it. So if you have any other questions, you might want to just take a look at their forum and see if anybody there has the answers for you. But links to the unit itself, as well as the software and drivers, are there. And while it certainly adds one step, the fact that there are Windows, Mac, and Linux versions of the software available will certainly make this easier for everybody. So check out links if you're interested. High-quality N64 replacement shells from the company TrogTech are in stock and ready to ship at Stone Age Gamer. There's a bunch of different colors available, ranging from $70 to special edition ones that are either $95 and one very limited special edition one that's $150, but most of them are just the $70 price point, which is very fair for something this high quality that comes with everything that you would need except the screws, which you would take from your original console itself. Now, this is the same one that I had the Kickstarter a while back that I did the promotion for on the website and talked about a lot here. And for some insane reason, I just forgot to relist them on the website. I don't know why. Maybe it was because I had the banner up for so long to their Kickstarter campaign. Totally my bad, and I apologize to everybody who's been wanting a quality shell, but they have been available and still are from Stone Age Gamer. And there's even more themes planned for the future for different runs of production. Now, I will have to immediately address that before these things even hit the shelves, the notorious Bitfucks had made their own version of it, a much lower quality version, and started selling it. And while you absolutely cannot legitimately call that a clone, because they're both just reproductions of the N64 shell, I refuse to support any clone companies at all unless there's absolutely no other alternative and I really need what they're selling. So a cheap, low-quality knockoff when I could support a good company making really good quality products, there's just not even a hesitation in my brain. I would always pick this one. But I get it. Some people are on budgets. Some people live in places where shipping would be much higher than others. I understand. I just always want to push back on anybody that supports cloners, even if the product. Wow, it's going to be a sharp one today, huh, everybody? Even if the product they're selling isn't a clone, companies like Bitfunks that make a living by stealing from other people, I just will not give them my money. So that's totally up to you. The one other really cool thing you might want to know about these is that it comes with rear AV port covers that are notched on the inside to support HDMI mods. So if you have just a standard analog outputting N64 and you put this in, it looks perfectly stock. However, if you have one of those HDMI mods, it's notched on the inside, so you could use a razor blade or an X-Acto knife and cut out the port and make it look really pro. And I'm terrible at that stuff. I always have ports that never look exactly straight, especially if you look up close. But whenever they're notched like this, it's so much easier because you just go very slowly and you go along with the cut that's already there, and you absolutely can make it look factory perfect. So that's a small but really cool bonus for anybody that has an HDMI mod. But honestly, just check out the post and see what colors you're interested in, see if it's at the price point that you want. And it comes with basically everything that you would need. It has the full list of stuff right here in the post if you want it. But yeah, I mean, this thing is, if you want a replacement shell for your N64 and you want one that's quality, this is the one that you get. Next up, the musician Remute has just opened pre-orders on his latest album called Digital Bubble Bath for the Nintendo DS. And if you're unfamiliar with Remute's work, he's been releasing albums on different consoles and handhelds over the past couple of years that use the audio chips on those platforms in order to create the music. So this isn't something like an MP3 player on a cartridge that plays through the pins. This actually is using the audio chips from each of these very unique platforms to create the music. And this one's on the Nintendo DS. The price came to just over $40 after shipping. And if you want to buy it, just remember that it's going to say buy vinyl on Bandcamp, because Bandcamp doesn't have an option for a Nintendo DS cartridge. But if you want to check out the album and hear what it's like before buying, you could preview it right on Bandcamp. And if you purchase the physical version, you'll get the digital version along with it. So if you want any more details, including details on the special edition where you get some extra fun stuff with it, then please check out Crystal's post. But this is just another cool Remute album that I think anybody who is a fan of stuff like this would want to pick up, especially if you love the Nintendo DS and just want to have a unique experience through it. So more details, check out Crystal's post, and looking forward to checking this one out. Next up, Derek Pescarilla just reviewed a brand new ultra premium, very expensive wireless controller for the Dreamcast. And I want to say that right up front, that this product is absolutely not for everybody. This is for the hardcore Dreamcast fan, but I'm still a massive fan of stuff like this. I mean, it might not be for me, but just got to be a handful of people at least listening to this going, ooh, tell me more. So, well, I would absolutely recommend checking out Derek's video because he goes through all of the features, including the software that you could use to do button mappings and change things around. I'll just go over the basics. It's essentially a wireless Bluetooth controller with receiver for the Dreamcast that is less than a frame of latency measured by the creator, and has integration for the VM2, who is made by the same person, and also can have a virtual memory card in the controller, even though it's fully wireless. And that's something that in itself is an accomplishment, because all of the other ones have to have it connected to the Dreamcast side, because there's a constant stream of communication going back and forth, not only from the controller to the Dreamcast, but from the VM unit as well. So being able to do all of that wirelessly and maintain less than a frame of average latency, I think is a really awesome thing. There's also integrated memory card support, the ability to transfer stuff back and forth. I mean, this really is an absolutely fully loaded product. But once again, it is extremely expensive. So hardcore fans of the Dreamcast, or just people who like looking at nice things. I mean, I occasionally watch videos about cars I would never spend that much money on, but I still appreciate it for a beautiful work of art and a badass piece of machinery. I think a lot of people might want to check out the video in the post just to learn more about it. This definitely is not for your average Dreamcast fan, but if you're a hardcore Dreamcast fan, I think you would actually be interested in at least checking it out and considering it. So here's a, kind of a neat and unique thing, and if it's not for you, that's totally fine as well. Next up, Master Linkway recently posted updates to both Arcade Edition Mortal Kombat ROM hacks that he'd been working on, the Genesis version of Mortal Kombat and the 32X version of Mortal Kombat 2. And while both of these are minor updates, I wanted to talk about them not just to hype the project again, because I'm obviously a huge fan of Mortal Kombat, but some people were having trouble getting it working, so I just kind of wanted to talk about it very quickly. The patches are completely free to download, but if you would like to support, of course, you could either do it from the Itch.io page or on Patreon. And the only real tricks that you need to know is you need to get the exact original ROM to patch for this to work. I posted the full file names of both of the ones that I used right here in the post, so a quick search on any web browser should be able to find this for you very quickly. And the only other thing to note is the Mortal Kombat 2 32X Arcade Edition does offer a version with the arcade audio that would only work on original hardware with a ROM cart that supports Sega CD emulation. This will not work on the MiSTer because MiSTer doesn't support 32X CD yet, and the DE10 Nano platform might not even allow for that. There might not be enough space. That might have to be something that goes on the MiSTer 2 or whatever comes after it. So if you're a MiSTer user, you just don't get the CD quality audio. But if you have a Mega EverDrive Pro or a Mega SD, and of course an original 32X, then you would actually be able to get the CD quality audio support along with it. So check out the post for all the info that you would need. But once again, I wanted to talk about it both to hype it, but just also to remind everybody that you need the exact correct file name or the file type for the original in order for it to work. And just don't bother trying to get the extra audio working on MiSTer. It just doesn't work yet, but who knows? MiSTer devs are pretty amazing, so who knows what's coming around the corner. The developer Apocalypse just released a really unique cartridge adapter that allows you to play Colecovision games on a Sega Master System. And there's a lot to tell about this, but I'll just start with the basics and the price. And it's $70 plus shipping, and that includes the cartridge itself that comes in a Sega Master System style case. It just has a cartridge input on the top, as well as a standard SMS box with sleeve. So it'll look like an official product. Now, this is not technically emulation. I mean, I guess it is because it's doing on-the-fly translation of the memory and port mapping, but this is done with no latency added. So it's not like you're running it through a software emulator. There's no FPGA on this. It's essentially taking the ColecoVision's incredibly similar hardware to the Master System and just mapping everything over on the fly. Now, there's a few things that you need to note about this, and the first is obviously the controllers are very different, and you can't just plug a ColecoVision controller into a Master System. Even if you did and some buttons worked, not everything is mapped the same, and voltage could even be on a different pin, so you could even ruin the controller or damage the console. So definitely don't do that. However, Apocalypse has a code programmed into this so that you hold down reset on the Master System and either one of the directions on the control pad or a combination of stuff in order to press the numbers. Now, this obviously isn't going to be something that you would want to do mid-game for stuff that requires it, but there are tons of ColecoVision games where you just need the numbers to select how many players or your difficulty level. So in many cases, this is not a big deal at all. You plug in your Master System controller, you start it up, you hold down pause and whatever you want to do. One is just the up left directional arrow, diagonal, and that's it. You start playing and it just works like it should be with a much more comfortable controller, at least in my opinion. Next, this adapter will only work on the Master System 1 and 2. Both NTSC and PAL versions are supported, but it will not run on a Genesis or a Mega Drive with a power-based converter or any kind of converter, because it's the same reason that the Genesis can't play SG-1000 games. The VDP just doesn't support the legacy video mode. Plus, the Genesis in SMS mode lacks many signals on the cartridge pins, so there's just no way to make this work. It also will only work through the MK2000, the Japanese Master System, if you have a rear port adapter. So it's the one that you'd have to pop off the back, plug the Master System adapter into that, and then plug this into that, then plug your ColecoVision games. A little bit convoluted, but it won't work through the top cartridge adapters for the same reasons. It just doesn't have any of the same signals available that are there for the Master System versions of the cart. So that also means there won't be an MK2000 version where you just plug it into the top of that. Now, compatibility with all of the original retail games is excellent, with the only issues found so far are graphical issues with Dragonfire on the SMS2 and issues with Rock and Bolt on both. Some newer games won't work, but that's because some newer games are made using 3.3 volt parts designed to work on a 5 volt system. Renee from DB Electronics taught us this years ago why this is all a terrible idea. I don't want to rehash this again because there's just always people that insist that it's not a problem, but it very obviously is. So I think that's a realistic expectation. Original games should work fine, but maybe not this one. And the only other things to note is even if the games do work, the colors will be a bit off, which is due to a flaw in the hard-coded colors of Sega's VDP design, which is the exact same thing that you'd get when playing SG-1000 1,000 games on a Master System, whether it's a ROM cart or whether it's original carts on the console. And it's just not a result of the adapter, it's just how the VDP works. Some games might actually look better, though. That's all subjective. I just wanted everybody to know up front, this isn't an exact one-to-one, but it's pretty close. So basically, just like with Apocalypse's Game Gear to Master System cartridge adapter, there's a lot of trade-offs, and this isn't for everybody, but I do think there's a bunch of people out there who are thinking, my ColecoVision never works right. There's always problems with it. I don't want to have to do an RGB mod. So you could just plug this into your original Master System and get RGB. And if your favorite ColecoVision games don't use the number pad other than to start the game, it's really a non-issue. If you want to see it in action, Apocalypse posted a couple of years ago now, I think, a demo of the prototype. Just note that this is a prototype. So in the final version that you're getting, it looks like an actual Master System cartridge as pictured here. But this is a cool project. I love stuff like this. I really love weird niche things that I think not everybody would want, but I think everybody would kind of appreciate just learning about. And, I do have one or two ColecoVision games that I really enjoy that aren't really available anywhere else that's as easy to play. So I think this is kind of neat and something that I think you should consider if that's a situation that you're in. But either way, awesome that Apocalypse pulled that off. Ken from the What's Ken Making channel just released a full open source design for a portable MiSTer Handheld console that's based off of the QM Tech DE10 Nano alternative. And this is something that people have been talking about for a while. Ken's mentioned it before, and it looks really, really awesome. As with every kind of do-it-yourself handheld, there's some trade-offs, and this is kind of where Ken landed on what's the best of all worlds for now, and it is a little bit bigger and heavier than you would expect your average handheld to be, but this is a full-on MiSTer Handheld. The screen that Ken used is a 5-inch 800 by 480 resolution display, which, while it is a 5 by 3 aspect ratio, MiSTer software should compensate for all of that, so you still get the proper aspect ratio for your games, and it's using the HDMI input. So this certainly isn't as nice as like the Analog Pocket screen, but it's definitely something that, it's going to look pretty cool for the games that you play. There's do-it-yourself controller support for it, NFC integration. It uses a battery that only offers about 2 to 3 hours of gameplay, depending on what you have the screen brightness set to. But, all of this stuff is something that Ken's looking into and seeing how it could be improved, including community support, because this is an open source project. Anybody's really welcome to take a look at this and see what else you could get. Ken has all the files for the audio chips, the USB support, and even laid out pretty clearly the challenges and opportunities for improvement and stuff like that. I don't want to spoil the whole video because it really was an interesting video to watch, even if you're not a do-it-yourselfer, even if you're one of those people that like watches a bunch of Tito's videos but never does the soldering yourself, but you still appreciate what goes into it. This is definitely in that category, but I think it's also important to just kind of note that this is an open source project. And if you're one of the many people in the handheld scene that has designed your own components and learned how to integrate things like this into your own designs, it might be worth forking this or just contributing to it and coming up with some custom circuit boards that integrate a lot of this stuff in. Or maybe you could use any of the knowledge that you have from previous displays to integrate a different display or a different battery in here. Obviously, any way to slim it out would be good. But the one thing that Ken decided on that I agree with completely is that, at least for the start of this project, he wanted to make sure that the QM Tech DE10 was not modified in any way. So you don't have to remove any ports from it. This just plugs in. That way, if you end up making one of these and you decide to use it for a different project later, maybe you're going to make a different one later, maybe you just want to put it in a consoleized version, you don't end up destroying that QM Tech board. It could just be fully reusable to somewhere else. So, I think that was the right move, at least to start, but I also know how many people in the scene are really good at miniaturizing everything. So this is something that I'm really looking forward to see where the project goes. But if you just want to make yourself an awesome do-it-yourself MiSTer right now, everything's there. Check out the video. And Ken's going to be also uploading a step-by-step installation video at some point in the near future too, to check all this stuff out. But I think this is awesome. And I think everything that MiSTer has to offer in a handheld form factor is just really cool, and at the very least worth checking out the video. But I know my fellow nerds, and I know that there's a lot of brains right now probably listening to this going, I think I know how to do this a little different. So it's open source. Jump in from a community perspective. Let's all do this together and see what you all and Ken can come up with next as well. Dan from the Shiro crew just put together a post that updates everybody on some of the things going on in the Sega Saturn homebrew scene, and I'm just going to run through them pretty quickly, but if you're a fan of this stuff, please check out Dan's post, and of course, subscribe to the Shiro crew, watch the videos, the website. I'm a huge fan of what they do. But first up, Derek Pescarilla created a patch that swaps the soundtrack from the game Cyber Speedway to the Japanese version. So this is obviously preference based, and if you like one over the other, cool, but at least this way you'd be able to play it and have whichever soundtrack you prefer. Next, the Sakura Wars 2 translation is in its polish phase. So basically it's done, but they just want to go back and make sure that all the little details are being worked on and that everything is kind of ready to go. So that's exciting for anybody that's a fan of that series. Next up, there's a patch for Die Hard Arcade that forces 240p in all scenes. So the game occasionally switches between 224p and 240p, which if you're on a CRT makes zero difference, and this does not apply to you whatsoever. But if you play through a scaler, any resolution change could potentially cause some kind of drop. Even if you have it in like a RetroTink and fully buffered mode, you still might see a little flash on the screen just showing that resolutions have changed or something. So, and of course, if you're using older stuff like the OSSC, then that might be in the original RetroTink, you might have a larger drop there. But this is just to make all that stuff easier. So thanks to everybody who works on things like this, because if you are somebody who has a perfectly awesome setup with an original OSSC, there's no reason to change if you already like the way it is, but it's nice to not have this drop out. These little things make a big difference. Also, there's another Saturn tribute game that was teased, and the publisher made an announcement during a presentation streamed live on YouTube. It didn't hint at what the game or next game might be or when it would release, just that it was a Saturn tribute game. So, once again, if you want any more details, please check out Dan's post and, of course, the Shiro crew. And to everybody in the Saturn scene, keep it coming because y'all are working on some awesome stuff. Chris from Displaced Gamers posted another video in the Behind the Code series, this time focusing on the game Ghosts and Goblins for the NES, and specifically, why is the frame rate so weird in this game? So Chris is able to patch it to try to work at 60 frames per second, but in order to do so, he had to go back and figure out what Micronix did to update the NES graphics between video output frames. So this was another complicated one that I found really interesting, and it was neat to see, especially in the beginning where it was immediately jacked up to 60 frames per second, but the game got all crazy. I like seeing games unpacked like this, especially with all the visual examples, so you could see what's going on with it and kind of just watch all this stuff unfold. So as always, thanks to Chris for doing these. I find them fascinating, even though I'm not smart enough to be a game programmer. I still do very much enjoy watching them, and I think a lot of you all do as well, so check it out if you're interested. Well, that's it for this time. As always, thanks to everybody who watches, listens, plays nicely in the comments, and especially thank you to anybody who supports in absolutely any way, because it really is you who's keeping all this stuff going. So thank you all so much, and I will see you next week. This week's Roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.